Hi, everyone, and welcome to our Future Branches virtual event session, Personalizing Experiences Through Deeper Customer and Member Insights. I'm Chris Rand with WBR Insights, the research arm of the Future Branches event series. And joining me today are Anika Davis, AVP Member Experience at Associated Credit Union, and Elissa Riddell, Head of Marketing at Coconut Software. Anika, Elissa, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
So branch leaders, they can't continue to shape customer member experiences based on instincts and outside influences alone. So the purpose of this session is to provide some insights into how to use customer and member data to create better personalized experiences and drive efficiencies in the core processes that those involve. Now, it was really nice chatting with both Anika and Elissa just a few moments ago as we were getting ready for this conversation. And I'm really pleased to have two very, forward-thinking thought leaders in this field speaking with us today. So Anika, I'd like to start with you with my first question. And this builds sort of off of our last session where we were talking about this subject. Anika, in your mind, what does the concept of humanizing banking mean to you?
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Chris. And, one of the things that I found, I've been in banking now 23 years. And what I found is as, technology has evolved, as we have evolved as institutions, and I've worked both on the bank and the credit union, banking and credit union side, is that in our, efforts to provide the latest technology, offer the array of products and services that our customers and members are looking for, we've gotten away from the true needs of what the individuals are actually looking for. Be that in the form of human interaction, be
Mhm.
that in the form of branch locations. We've gotten away from that. So humanizing banking to me means get back to what made us popular and famous to begin with, why our customers and members decided to even interact with us and focus in on their unique needs.
Sure. Okay, great. Yeah, and I'll be really interested to hear more about how that concept plays into the subject that we're going to be talking about in this session.
Mhm.
Elissa, I wanted to give you a chance. You've spoken on this subject a little bit already, but what does the concept of humanizing banking mean to you?
Yeah, so I mean, I absolutely agree with what Anika just said, and I really think that it means that financial institutions and the vendors like Coconut Software that support them, we really do need to remember that their customers and also their staff are people. So they have these individual goals, they have preferences and priorities and needs behind the screens, behind the phones, behind the plexiglasses that are in our
Mhm.
offices and at our desks these days. And that we really should continue to keep these people front of mind whenever we're creating new products, figuring out new operational processes, and trying to engage them throughout their financial journey. And also just to make sure that whatever we do is making sure that your staff are giving them the tools, treating them like humans, and making sure that they remain engaged in order to help your customers and prospects.
Okay, great. All right. Well, I think that's a really good prelude to the rest of our conversation that we're having during this session, which is going to be focused on data and how banks can use that data, banks and credit unions, to improve customer and member experiences. So, Elissa, I'd like to stick with you for this next question. What are the data resources branch leaders commonly work with today to personalize customer experiences? What's the status quo, as we were talking about before we started?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's a great question. I mean, I would say in the conversations that we've had with financial institutions, we've really found that the primary data resources tend to come from customer engagement platforms. It comes from business intelligence or data tools, and then as well as marketing technologies. So things like HubSpot, your Survey Monkeys, your Google Analytics.
Mhm.
And so the key considerations that we find for leaders at financial institutions is really how are they leveraging that technology and that data to better understand not only their existing base of customers or members, but then how can they also use that to map out and personalize the buyer journey for their prospects as well. And so oftentimes, as we all know, working in big companies, these data points are very siloed and very difficult to connect. And what that means is that a lot of banks and credit unions don't really have a good picture as to what's truly going on. And so I think that's part of the reason why so many banks and credit unions, especially recently, are looking for help in connecting these points of data and then using that same technology to anticipate and proactively serve up more personalized messages. And so even something as simple as using someone's first name in a mobile app when they log in, that really helps them feel seen and helps them feel understood. And I would actually challenge everyone to say, now you need to actually take that a few steps further. And you need to provide your customers and your members and your prospects with options on how to engage with your staff. And that makes it a much richer experience. So being able to provide folks with an opportunity to create a pre-booked appointment, whether that's over the phone or video conference, as opposed to making them, mask up and glove up and come down to a physical location. And I think that there's really so much value in that personalized experience and asking them, how do you want to do business with us? And it makes those individuals feel valued, feel respected, and feeling like they're appreciated. And frankly, all of those are very important ingredients in having excellent customer experience and customer loyalty.
Okay, great. Thanks, Elissa. Anika, I wanted to give you an opportunity to chime in on this question as well. What are the data resources branch leaders work with today in your experience?
Yeah, so I've seen a lot of different things, similar to what, Elissa mentioned earlier, software, CRM software. I've even seen folks use the old-fashioned tick mark, and I'm not talking about 20 years ago, because, we have some really seasoned folks who've been out there and some who are really, risk adverse, change adverse to utilizing the technology that is available to us now. Some who like to utilize Excel spreadsheets, and they don't give you that full member 360 view of the member or customer that will really help you meet their needs. So one of the things that we're looking at is building out a CRM at the organization currently, because that helps us now put our finger back on, as we were discussing earlier, our finger on the pulse of what is Chris Rand like as a member? How are his habits different, than Anika's habits? Where is Chris in his life stage versus Anika? And really being able to have those conversations. And by presenting those tools to the frontline team, we're able to provide additional training and workshops where they can provide that unique experience to each member as they come along. We're also looking at when people are leaving us. Why are they leaving us? Elissa, you mentioned appointments a moment ago. So in the pandemic, we've gone through phases where our branches have been open, then the lobbies have been closed. Then they've been open again. So we've been doing that dance, based on cases. And we fortunately have the interactive teller machines. So we're able to utilize that equipment as well to provide that interaction, but we're also able to gain a sense of what's coming through those machines and utilize the data from those machines as well, which has been amazing for us during this time. But in the appointments, which we didn't have before, we had appointments before, but we weren't using them to the extent that we are now. We're able to see why our members are coming in and what they want. And because there's limited space in the lobby, because we can't have so many people in there, we're able to have those conversations and really get to the crux of why, Mr. Smith, are you in today and how can we better serve your needs? So we're becoming more fluid, if you will, in how we're able to procure data, because we realize we have to change. I think we would all agree the pandemic has forced us to realize we can't do things the way we've always done them. And now we're utilizing those interactions in a different way to understand the needs of our customers and members.
That's great. Yeah, I think you really highlighted an important key point there, and that's this idea that banks and credit unions really need to be responsive to what's going on with their customers and outside in the real world, as opposed to just putting office hours on the front door, so to speak.
Yes.
So that's really interesting to hear you describe that sort of real world experience there. And Anika, I'd like to go ahead and stick with you for this next question as well. You've highlighted some of these opportunities just now. Both of our speakers just did. What are some of the most common strategic shortcomings when personalizing experiences today?
Yeah, one of the things that I've seen, I've shared with you my banking experience and shared with the group. I've worked in the retail services or the branch delivery or branch ops space and on the sales and marketing side, teaching those frontline employees to have conversations. And we have become over time, banks and credit unions, we're scripted. We have a
Mhm.
script. This is the script. This is the product we're pushing for the
Right.
month. I can't stand those words because there's no empathy in there. There's no acknowledgement of this is Elissa's situation that I have, Elissa's situation right here in front of me today, right now. So we've written the member, the customer out of the equation. We've been focused sometimes on the important things, the bottom line, meeting goals. I remember being a branch manager and we had an expression, you're only as good as your last month, right? So you're flying high on the 29th because you met your goal. And the first you're like, oh, I got to start all over again. So we have to think when we're planning as leaders and partnering with vendors, like Elissa and her team, is how do we continue to bring that customer, that member into that conversation? And some of the organizations for which I've worked, they've done focus groups. We write that out of the equation. We think we know what's best because we have big data, because we have analytics. And the report tells us that in 3 years, Chris is going to buy a new car because he's gotten tired of the one that he's had. Well, have we had a conversation? And I think that's the biggest part that we miss out on, those conversations to keep our finger on the needs, on the pulse of what the customer and the member is actually needing.
Sure. Okay, great. Yeah, great distinctions there
Mhm.
between, perspectives on customers and members. Elissa, what do you think are some of the most common strategic shortcomings when personalizing experiences?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly think the most basic, most common shortcoming that we hear from oftentimes when chatting with financial institutions is just the fact that so many of these banks and credit unions aren't actually tracking engagement metrics. They're not actually tracking the data. So, being able to answer fairly basic questions like, do you know how many people are booking appointments with your staff at a particular location for a particular product? Are they even showing up for those appointments, or are they no shows, or are they late, or do they have to reschedule? And then when those people do show up, what are the outcomes? Are they actually buying that solution or not? Are you improving your customer engagement, your NPS over time? And so, unless you're tracking this information, these appointments that are scheduled, the walk ins that you receive, the mix of in person versus phone versus video conference meetings, frankly, your leaders and your managers just don't know the full picture of how your staff are engaging with your customers. And so, once you do have that baseline, once you've figured out your marketing and tech stack to be able to get that information, then you can really get into some interesting stuff with your marketing teams and with your customer engagement teams and start tinkering with how you're driving those most revenue generating engagements. So you can start to answer some of the questions like, are the best conversations happening from social media source touch points? Like when we ask folks questions about their financial goals, are we able to record that information, keep it, and then bring up those answers in the future? And even staffing, do you have the right people scheduled at the right time with the right skill set to be able to answer the questions and ensure that wait times aren't overly long? And so I think with those understandings, with that data, then you can get into some of those really fun personalizations of experiences with your customers and with your prospects. And you'll actually be able to prove what's working, what isn't, and then what's the return on those investments.
Okay, excellent. And Elissa, I'd like to stick with you for this next question too. You highlighted some of the opportunities there that were pretty exciting. Now, building off that, what strategic goals and real initiatives should banks explore in their data strategies moving forward?
Yeah, great question. And I could speak probably for an hour on this, but I'll keep it brief. So I would say, other than just simply starting by implementing a way to track your digital and physical interactions, I'd say, and this is backed up by our research, it's also backed up by other studies from folks like Forrester and PwC, that really placing an emphasis on the customer experience is going to result in increased member and customer loyalty, but also an increase in the share of wallet. And so in September, if folks participated in the webinar I hosted just previous to this, I mentioned that Forrester actually published a study based on banking consumers in the US. And what it showed among customers that felt valued, so that their time was respected, that they were appreciated, 87% would advocate for that bank. 82% intended to spend more. 71% plan to stay, and with super engaged customers, the ones that are really happy that they're having good experiences with their financial institution, they tended to net a 23% incremental increase in revenue.
Wow.
And so I think we all kind of knew, like in our gut,
Yeah.
that treating customers like humans, treating them well, would result in a better bottom line. But now we actually have that hard data to prove it out. And so I would say if your financial institution hasn't yet prioritized that digital transformation of your customer experience, I think it's going to be a very necessary move, and frankly, probably an immediate thing that you have to start prioritizing, especially because everyone's operating in such a highly competitive market with these new entrants like digital only banks that are truly instigating a change in customer expectations.
That's great. Yeah, I'm glad you brought up some of those competitive factors there too. I think that's a really important subject that's relevant to this conversation. Thank you, Elissa. Anika, I wanted to give you an opportunity to chime in here on the question. What strategic goals and real initiatives do you think banks and credit unions should explore in their strategies moving forward?
I'd love to piggyback off of a couple of things that Eli said a moment ago. CU Insights just put out an article. It was later at the end of last year that talked about how, credit unions are known for their service, and that's our history. However, we can't rely on that alone. And now we're finding in some regards with some financial institutions, both on the banking and credit union side, that banks are outperforming credit unions because they've gotten wind of exactly what she has said. Whereas, in credit union, some, not all, we're kind of laying back and saying, okay, well, our service will get us through, not realizing we're in Metro Atlanta. We have to be competitive. At one point, I did a study when I was still in the banking side, that there were 278 different banks. Now that was prior to the online outfits that we see out there, as well as the fintechs that we see out there. So we have to continue to be competitive in order to stay alive and be relevant. The number of credit unions, unfortunately, has shrunk over the last several years. So we have to get into the space and play nicely, if you will, meaning that not be afraid to offer our members the products and services that they're seeking when they're going to other financial institutions. One of the key things that I see, that we miss from a strategy perspective is, first of all, having organizational key performance indicators. What is it that you are looking to accomplish? In my conversations with credit unions, I found that they don't have those outlined. And if you don't have those outlined, you're not going to really understand what it is that you're seeking to accomplish organizationally. Then once you have those organizational KPIs in place, then you can begin to say, okay, for those departments that touch our membership the most, the frontline teams, how are we disseminating these KPIs out to those different departments? And how are we measuring it? What are the tools and resources that we're going to use? Are we going to have, one of the things we're working on organizationally is performance evaluations, performance goals, and job descriptions. Exactly what Eli said. You got to have the right people in the right places on the ship. I went into a store the other day. The person they had at the greeter didn't want to talk to anybody. This is a retail business. So who do you have sitting in those seats who are greeting your members and customers, pandemic, plexiglass or not? And what are they like? Do you have them in the right seat? Because that's going to make a difference about the relationship. And then also too, once you have that strategy in place, develop a plan to hold your people accountable for that. But get them to understand not just the how you meet your goal. We'll open 3 accounts, you'll meet your goal. Get your people to understand the why. If you get them to understand the why and how their role plays an important part in the organization being successful, you will have a winning strategy when you combine data, bringing the people, engaging your employees, then you can engage your members. We're working on engaging our employees before we even engage our members. So there's a lot of behind the scenes work that's part of that strategy to be successful.
Okay, excellent. Anika, I think you brought us some really great points there, leaning into the final comments we have here planned for this session. And we do have just a couple minutes left for that. Building off what you just said, how can your peers begin their own initiatives for improving customer and member personalization?
Yeah, I know, the job market kind of ebbs and flows. And like I said, in my work with credit unions and talking with my peers in the credit union space, one of the things I always encourage them to do is, if you can, begin to assemble a team of data analysts. And even if a team could be, Chris, one person, because you have to start somewhere. And someone who understands descriptive, prescriptive, and predictive analytics, that they can be the guru in the organization who can begin to say, okay, we have data, let me tether it, get it all in one system, get it all reading the same. So that way we have some really good, reliable, and valid data points that we can begin to assess organizational progress or opportunities for growth. Get with partners, find partners in the space who can help you if you can't do it internally. Like we have the means, because we're a bigger credit union, to build a CRM. A lot of organizations don't have that bandwidth or the money to do that. You might need to partner and start slowly with an organization or a vendor that can help you, begin to pull the pieces together, because you have to understand what that picture looks like. So just getting someone in the space in your organization, or even a consultant who can help paint that data picture for you.
That's great. Yeah, great advice. And Elissa, I'm eager to hear what you have to say about the subject too. How can banks and credit unions begin their own initiatives for improving customer and member personalization?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think Anika raised some excellent points. What I'd add would be really to consider what other industries, even companies, are doing that's making a difference outside of just financial institutions. So, for example, the perennial example, Netflix. I get emails from them on a regular basis that are personalized to the show I specifically have. They show me the content, they serve it up, and it's specifically tailored and curated to what I am going to find interesting based on my past experience going into the future. And honestly, I don't know how they do it, because it's a weird mix of, sitcoms and dinosaur shows for my toddler. So hats off to Netflix for figuring that out. But I would say, really ask yourself, is there a way to bring that philosophy into your organization? So for example, if you have a member who just got a mortgage with you, can you proactively share home insurance information? Maybe equip them with details about a HELOC if they have to do renovations, even tips on how to organize their pantry most effectively. Like, what can you do to build those conversations? And then the second thing I would say would be chat with other credit unions and banks, in your network, to learn what they've been doing. What are the activities that they've been doing, and rely on the case studies and the data points to help determine what your next step forward is. We're all being asked to change so quickly, so significantly, that it's really worthwhile to do the research and the due diligence ahead of time. Find partners that understand the complex environment in which everyone is operating. And then remember that there's really no reason to reinvent the wheel when it comes to these engagement platforms and these digital conversations that you're having. Learn from others. I strongly recommend considering buying versus building in-house, because that's like a whole other kettle of fish. But ask for proof from companies like us, like Coconut Software, to prove out that they are the right partner for you, that they're going to deliver those results, and learn from each other. Attend these sorts of webinars. It's the best recommendation I can provide.
For sure.
Okay, excellent. Well, I just wanted to point out, a great point you brought up there towards the end, Elissa, that, there's an urgency to change, but there's also an opportunity, right, to change, and doing that right can be all the difference and make a huge difference moving forward. Anika, did you have any final comments to chime in on at the end there? Or?
No, I think the power of partnership is so great, because and that's why I was like, yes, when she said, talk to other folks, don't try and reinvent the wheel from scratch, and you spend time and spin your wheels literally, trying to figure it out, when you can reach out to others who are doing, great things, perhaps with, minuscule resources, just to get the ball moving. Start somewhere. So building relationships, is key to success as well. So I love that point, Eli.
Okay, excellent. Well, I just want to thank both of you, Anika and Elissa, for joining me today. Thank you again for jumping on the call.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
And I want to thank our audience as well for tuning in and being a part of the Future Branches community. Stay tuned for more. Thanks. Oh, shoot. Hold on. I've got a little